Welcome. Hello, this is Joe Motil live from 167 West Cook Road at my house. This is my music room, piano, as you can see. I am an average piano player, don't let anybody fool you, but I used to be, back in the day, played the jazz quintet and things like that, coffee shops, Culture Arts Center, a few bars on campus, Stash and Little Brothers, Dick's Den even, so thought I might feel comfortable sitting in this room doing my first video ever. So a little bit of information about myself. And I know a lot of you already know something about me since due to my activity in the community. I'm one of 11 children. I grew up in Clintonville on 360 Clinton Heights Avenue. And I have lived in this neighborhood for 48 years, and I lived in the University District for 14. I'm one of 11 children. I'm a lifelong resident of Columbus. I did attend Youngstown State University for 1 year. I also was a walk-on the junior varsity basketball team, which was something that one of the reasons why I went there was to play college basketball. I have been married now for 31 years. I have 2 children, grown children, a son that is 26 and a daughter that is 31. And we also have, my wife Monica and I have a 6-year-old grandson. I have been involved now for, I'm guessing, about 33 years in the community. It all kind of got started back in the day when I lived on South Campus in an apartment at 8th and Hunter when they were tearing down some perfectly fine buildings in the area in order to create more high density in that neighborhood. At the time when I was living there, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was actually still homeowners in the area. We actually had a woman in her probably early 80s that lived right across the street from us who still had her home and eventually sold out to developers after I had left. But it was a shame to see some of the things that happened in that neighborhood. Regardless, when I saved up enough money, I lived amongst the bugs and the mice for 8 years in that apartment. The rent was cheap, so I was able to save money, and I wanted to buy a house on either Oakland or Northwood Avenue. 2 beautiful streets. Back in the early 1900s, they were actually named in a competition as the most beautiful streets in Columbus. This was around 1920, I believe. But beautiful neighborhood. I rode my bicycle up and down those streets just about every day for months and months, waiting for a for sale sign to come up, and one finally did. So I landed at 33 East Oakland Avenue and found out, to my surprise actually, that the neighborhood was full of community activists. Long-term residents, people have lived there 30, 40 years, professors from the university, there was a judge that lived up the street. A lot of diversity. You felt like you were in a third world living on that street. People spoke in broken English, Greek, and oh geez, I forget what some of the other nationalities were, but it was you were like in a different world. It was a great first home. Anyways, that's where I got my start. I was still involved with the community, concerned about code enforcement issues, trash, litter, crime, noise from the students. The tearing down of beautiful historic homes in the neighborhood, all through the University District actually. So I decided to run for the University Area Commission, got elected. During my tenure on the commission, I served as the zoning chairman for about a year, which in turn I got familiar with City Hall and the workings of City Hall. I would go down there to represent the University District on variances, work with attorneys, who were representing the developers that wanted to make changes to properties and so forth and so on. So actually, in terms of code enforcement, I was very active with that when I first moved down there as well. I would virtually walk down the streets of certain in the neighborhood and write down addresses, especially from the rental properties, of code enforcement issues pertaining to those properties. I would call it code enforcement. They knew me by name. Back in the day, we didn't have email and stuff like that, so I actually had to fax my complaints or mail them to them. And I would have a list of 30 probably properties, and from peeling paint to broken sidewalk to stuff like that. and some of the code enforcement officers actually would say that I kept them in business. So it was quite an experience, and what was really demoralizing was the fact that code enforcement officer, when they did come out to your property, the one that you complained on, even if the one next to it was actually falling apart, they could not write up orders on it. So we fought that too, said how ridiculous this is for code enforcement to come out to a complaint that was filed by a citizen, and here's a house next door with the gutters that are hanging down, and the roof is falling apart, and the front porch is falling apart, and it's not getting fixed, and they can't even write up a complaint on it because nobody's actually done it, formally. So that actually has changed since then, and I'd like to think that I maybe had something to do with that. Due to my background in preservation, my concern for historic properties and such, and my involvement in working in the commercial construction industry, and also living in an historic district, the Northwood Park subdivision, I was given a seat, appointed to a seat by Mayor Greg Lashutka on the Columbus Historic Resources Commission's Architectural Review Board, and also served as vice chairman during part of my term. I was very involved, like I said, in preservation issues. Back when they tore down the Ohio Penitentiary, myself and a lot of other preservationists felt that they should have saved some of those buildings and incorporated into the new arena district. If you look at pictures of what's currently there, you can see that some of the buildings that are actually built, they somewhat do mimic the style of some of the buildings that were part of the Ohio Penitentiary. Pavey Square, more current thing that I was very involved with much of you know. Clinton Theater, Clinton Annex, a lot of buildings in the university in Clintonville and primarily. I also served as a board of director on the organization FLOW, which is the Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed. I was one of the first board members on that organization. It exists to this day. They're more of an educational resource in terms of the effects that the river has for Columbus and its watersheds and so forth. I served as vice president of an organization called PEER, which is Progress for Environmental and Economic Responsibility. And back in the mid-1990s, we were formed to fight what was then the Morris-Bethel connector. That was going to actually connect Bethel Road, build a bridge across the Olentangy River, and connect it directly with Morris Road. It's a straight line if you ever look at the overview. And our feeling was, and the feeling amongst a lot of people, that this would have torn down about 70 homes on Rathbone Avenue. It would have had an impact on Old Beach Wall, because it would have been a 4-lane highway virtually, affecting the property values of Old Beach Wall, which would have butted to that 4-lane highway. And then as it went from North High Street up to Indianola, it would have also affected, Morris Road would have basically turned into a commercial strip. All the homes on Morris Road between High Street and Indianola would have turned commercial, and then the people that live on East Jeffrey, just to the 1 block south of Morris, they would have been staring out of their back doors at the backs of commercial strip, loading docks, things like that, noise, and it would have definitely had an impact on their property values as well. So we fought that and won. It went to the ballot, defeated it. Defeated another one, another proposal for the connector. I won't go into too much detail of that, but the very people we were fighting with to defeat the first one tried to compromise with Don Casto, who owns Grayson Shopping Center, to come up with a different solution, and we fought against the people we were working with the first time and said no to that, and that idea was eventually thrown in the trash too. I served as the president of the Tuttle Park Community Recreation Council now for about 25 years, and again, raising money for the park through OSU football parking. I virtually have my fingers on just about everything that you look at down there at that park if you walk outside of it. From every mural that's there, park bench, the gardens. I'm kind of the self-appointed landscaper and taking care of those gardens during the spring and summer and fall. And just numerous other projects I've been involved with down at the park. I've also done some youth coaching for baseball, youth baseball, girls softball, and high school basketball. So that's a little bit of my back. I could go into so many different things and different campaigns I've been involved with. I know I'm looking at my clock there. I said I'm into 10 minutes now, so you can do what you want with this. But in terms of editing it, you know, it's amazing how much I talk here, and I don't think I'm even talking for 10 minutes. I still think I'm under 3. But anyways, a little bit about my political involvement. My first run for office was 1995 for Columbus City Council in a 3-way race for the unexpired term against Lisa Griffin and Peggy Fisher. At the time, I had moved from my home on on Oakland, and lived in a small 1,100 square foot cottage home on Walhalla, and that was my first run for public office. Not a lot of people knew a whole lot about me. They could not, you know, who's this Motil guy and so forth and so on. I tried, you know, Denny White, who was the chairman of the party at the time, tried to talk me out of running. He didn't even know who I was, but you know, they were afraid it was going to hurt the incumbent, Lisa Griffin, who was appointed by then Council President John Kennedy, her chances of winning. So I said, no, I'm going to run. And by the way, it was different back then. You know, we just got our signatures, and all 3 of us were on the ballot. There was no primary, anything like that. If you got your signatures, you were in the general election. It was kind of interesting that things were a little bit different back then. So anyways, as many of you know, Lisa Griffin was the last city council incumbent to lose a race, the one that I was involved with. And yes, I do take responsibility, partial responsibility for her losing. I received about 11,000 votes and I raised, I think, about $4,000. And she lost by 8,000 votes. And they pumped a ton of money into Peggy Fisher's campaign. Fisher finished the term out. Mary Ellen O'Shaughnessy decided to run. She approached me in '97 asking me that I not run. I agreed to do so. She also offered me to do things for me, whatever it may be, to help me at the park or what have you. But I just told her, no thanks. You know, if you don't want me to run, I'm not going to run. So they rewarded me, I guess you could say, with the to run for the state house seat, 27th district, which at the time was Clintonville, Worthington, Arlington, and heavily Republican, probably about 70-30. And E.J. Thomas was going to be term limited, and my intention was to run again in 2000, but I lost the '98 race. I actually received one of the highest percentages of any challenger to E.J. Thomas out of his, I think it was about 16 years that he served, and I got 41% of the vote, which is really pretty damn good. With the exception of one other candidate, I think that raised about $250,000 from Worthington and still lost. But anyways, 2000 I ran in the primary against Mark Hatch. They endorsed Mark Hatch for the race. He was president of the Columbus School Board at the time. Hatch clobbered me. And then in 2003, I ran again for Columbus City Council in a primary, along with Bob Fitrakis, actually. I was actually even endorsed by the Columbus Dispatch for that race. But again, Bob and I both lost. There's a big, nice, interesting story I'll have to share with you guys sometime. Write-in candidate, 2009, 2015, and 2017. Again, and most of you know I work in the commercial construction industry. For 38 years, I've actually been in the construction industry for about 40. And I worked as a laborer, retired laborer from Laborers Local 423, but I did work as a construction laborer for 27 years, and I currently work as a construction safety manager and have so for just over 13 years now. Prior to working with AECom Hunt, which is my current employer, I worked with Elford Incorporated, one of the bigger construction managers and general contractors in Columbus. They've been around since 19, I believe, 10. And they do a lot of work in the short north, building all of those condos and stuff like that. So, and I also ran for business manager and president, and I believe district council when during in the '90s primarily in my Laborers Local 423. And there's a lot of history behind that as well I'd like to share with some of you sometime if you're ever interested. So I'm running for council. because, as you all know, there's really no independent-minded council members. There hasn't been for decades. Everything's a slam dunk down there. I think the whole system, as you know, it's rigged to maintain power and to benefit the rich and the powerful that control the city. And that has held true for just too long. And I've always been somebody who's tried to, work with the people and tried to, fight for the people's right, their policies and the way we see things and how development has affected the university district in particular when I was involved with that. And I've just always been outspoken about it. And past and current city council members and mayors, they all know my reputation. They all know that, when I come down there, I'm going to say what's on my mind. I'm not going to hold back. And I've always felt compelled to help those that are in need, don't have a voice. And I feel that, I've always spoken for people that can't maybe make it down to city council or don't have a voice or aren't capable of, relaying their message to the people that need to hear it. And I don't know what it is, but it's something that's inside of me. And I just can't seem to let it go, and that's fine with me, but I just feel like I'm a fighter and somebody who's going to continue to fight for injustice and fairness and opportunity. One of the questions I believe you wanted to know, what are some of my priorities? And again, addressing issues that contribute to poverty, basic quality of life, increasing affordable housing, helping people find good paying jobs with an emphasis on construction industry, in the construction industry. And that, again, is my involvement currently with the NAACP as the chairman of the Labor and Industry Committee, and also as a member of the an executive committee member with the local chapter of the NAACP. And it is one of our duties is to work with the building trades unions and the non-union ABC to seek more minorities into the construction industry, and really just basically more people into the construction industry, and not, I hate to say it, but a lot of the nepotism that occurs that I'm familiar with in the unions and so forth, and they're really pretty far behind in terms of hiring of minorities, and not just black, but Hispanic and others too. So it's got to be changed, and there is just way too much work and not enough workers in this town, and it's not slowing down, and we don't perceive it to slow down anytime in the near future. I mean, it's going to take at least, there's going to be a ton of work for at least the next 5 years, and they don't have enough workers in Columbus to provide for all these jobs, so that's a big issue. As most of you know, again, I'm very outspoken about tax abatements. I want to put a halt to the tax abatement policies, especially as it relates to the affluent neighborhoods, whether it's the Short North downtown, German Village, Easton, Polaris, Rickenbacker, and those places. It's got to stop. And there is a reason and a good time to possibly use tax abatements in distressed areas and places that need them. Again, that's something else that needs to be looked into, and not something that I'm exactly against. Also, really, and as being, I guess, just being a voice of the people as it relates to action from of our Columbus Police Department, undesirable neighborhood new development, and really just supporting the neighborhoods and citizens when it comes to city policy. I mean, I've gone to Board of Zoning meetings and listened to all the crap there, and we all know how it works. And I get sick of going to BZA and places like that when you know you don't have a chance. And I'm very tired of it, and the people that live in the neighborhoods are tired of them being ignored by bodies such as the BZA, City Council, the mayor, you name it. So again, I want to be that voice on City Council that speaks on their behalf. And and I will, and that is my full intention to do so. So during my campaign, I'm going to continue to attend City Council meetings, speak out against any matter that I can lend my voice to, and I will continue to march and protest, against injustice, attend meetings wherever needed to listen and engage in conversation with citizens of those neighborhoods. And of course, I'm going to remain outspoken and speak on behalf of those who don't have a voice. And I will travel where needed to deliver my message. So I see I'm way past my 5 minutes. It's showing 20 minutes, but I felt like, I couldn't put this together in 3 to 5 minutes. And I know, believe me, the routine when it comes down to sitting at Cannon at nights and putting together your short little 1 minute response, and hopefully sometimes you get a 2 minute response. But again, this is a little bit about me, and I think most of you already know enough about me, but I hope that if you have any questions that you will come forth to me, ask me about some of the things that I just spoke of, and we can learn more about each other. So thanks, hope this helps.